Hey everyone, my name is Casey Giovinco. I am the author of Garbed in Green, Gay Witchcraft and the Male Mysteries, and this is my second video of 2019. For those of you who have been following me on social media, you know exactly what I'm doing. But for those of you who are just getting an introduction to me through this video, let me give you a brief recap. As 2018 was coming to a close, I was getting incredibly frustrated with the state of gay dating and my personal love life within the state of gay dating. And I thought to myself, what better way to handle this than to apply my occult principles and my witchcraft and my magic to gay dating? Because I wrote a book on gay witchcraft, I certainly can navigate this. And I kind of wanted to give you guys a chance to see who I am and what I'm about, and maybe get to know me better and let me get to know you better. And so that's what these videos are about. Now, in between making that decision and making the first video, I enrolled in a relationship coaching class so that I could navigate what my own struggles around relationships are. Because as a witch, I really buy into the witch's pyramid, and I don't believe that any magic can happen before you know yourself and your situation thoroughly. So in order to understand myself better and to understand what I'm struggling with and navigate that more effectively so that I can work the magic that needs to be done, I enrolled in a relationship coaching class. And I'm going to share my homework with you and let you guys see what I go through in order to come to the conclusions I need to come to. By the way, this is the homework. So I'm going to share my homework with you and let you see me navigate this, and then we'll go through the entire process together. Anyway, the last 2 weeks have been a little dicey for me because since my last video, I had this class on what they called an enlightened relationship versus a typical relationship. And I applied my New Year's resolution to my Grindr account and my Scruff account. Now, let me tell you, my Grindr and Scruff are like the desert. They're like the desert. There are tumbleweeds rolling through my Grindr and my Scruff because I said I'm not willing to have indiscriminate hookups without some level of connection. Now, I said it a bunch of different ways. I tried a bunch of different methods of communicating that. None seemed to be better than the other. They all seem to bring it to a screeching halt. So I've chosen to find it kind of funny. And to navigate this as yet another piece of the puzzle. So that's what I'm going to do. Grindr and Scruff aside, the relationship coaching class on the enlightened relationship was a little bit difficult for me because at first blush, the way they described an enlightened relationship sounded very much like a utilitarian construct, and it had no romance to it. But after I sat with it for the better part of a week and I navigated it, I thought about the homework, I was like, it doesn't have to be that way. That's my own damage around it. Let me look at this differently. And so I'd like to navigate some of that with you and see how you guys think about it. So they define a typical relationship. Let me just go over some of this stuff with you now before I get to my responses. But they define a typical relationship as characterized by shared living environment, shared responsibilities, friendship, and physical intimacy. Okay, so I don't think that's all there is to a typical relationship, excuse me. But that's a good start. And so they compare that to an enlightened relationship. Shared interests and quality time. All right. Mutual support for each other's growth. I'm still on board. Emotional intimacy. Now, if my Grindr is any indication about the state of an enlightened relationship in gay culture, we're screwed. But emotional intimacy would be really lovely. And then They call it true companionship. So, what's true companionship? The way I reconciled this for myself is true companionship is like the Wiccan concept of perfect love and perfect trust. And for me, that made a lot of sense because the way I feel about the witches in my coven, I could totally see a healthy relationship coming out of that. We love each other unconditionally, we support each other in our growth, we give each other the freedom to be who we are, and we don't guilt each other for the things that we do that we don't that the other people don't understand, and there's a lot of mutual support. And yeah, that does seem like it would be a good place to start with a relationship. So for me, as a coven-based initiatory witch, perfect love and perfect trust made a lot of sense in terms of this true companionship. Now, in a typical relationship, the relationship can be improved with communication strategies, compromise, remembering the commonalities between us, accepting each other's differences, and becoming aware of triggers for the other person and patterns that lead you down bad pathways. Um, but in an enlightened relationship, these these types of relationships improve by creating a shared life vision. I'm on board with that. Increasing quality time together. Now, if you've ever read Gary Chapman's The Five Love Languages, one of them is quality time. That happens to be my love language, so I'm totally on board with quality time. Uh, Helping each other reach their potential, improving the depth of your connection, and, like I just told you, learn each other's love language. So there are five love languages: acts of service, affirmations, gifts, physical touch, and quality time. I don't know why I did that out of order, but there you go. Those are the five. And if you learn to communicate in each other's love language, you're going to be able to handle about 85 to 90% of the problems that show up. So, for example, Gary Chapman, in his book, talks about the love languages, and he says the biggest problem is that most people date outside of their love language. We just can't help it. Like, that's not something we screen each other for. But somebody who is an acts of service love language married to a physical touch person, they're going to have a little bit of a problem because the physical touch person wants to cuddle or have sex, and they view this to be their version of telling you they love you. But the acts of service person wants you to take out the trash or do the dishes, and that tells them that you love them. So when you don't do the dishes or take out the trash, they hear you don't love them. But for you, it's just being slacktastic. It has nothing to do with the fact that you don't love them or not, because you, as a physical touch person, would stop having sex with them or stop touching them if you didn't love them. But this miscommunication starts to cause a lot of problems. So let me say this. Gary Chapman is a Christian psychologist. Take that for what it is. He's very, very spiritual in his way. And the book is, in my opinion, very badly written. But the concept is so brilliant that it makes up for it. And the level of research that he did into these five love languages, I think, is so awe-inspiring that everybody, regardless of their spirituality, should probably read this book. In fact, it has a special place in my heart because before my dad died, back in 2001, the last year of his life, he gave me this book and he said, Casey, I'm a little worried about you being gay because I'm afraid you're going to wind up alone. In a straight relationship, the woman kind of regulates the man, and some of his more base desires don't run the relationship. But in a gay relationship, who's going to do the regulation? And I was like, okay, I'll read your book. Now, what's funny to me is I've sort of struggled with the fact that my dad was prophetic. I've struggled with that because that upsets me, but I can't deny that his wisdom was valuable. Like, there does need to be somebody in the relationship who's paying attention to the emotionality of it. And these five love languages, he viewed them to be the key to figuring out how to make all of that happen. So I read it as a thing to like bond with my dad. And after he died, I really gained a lot of value from it. And every so often I go back and I reread it, even though it is dreadfully written. I go back and I reread it and it makes me feel closer to him. That said, all of the sacredness of that aside, the theory is brilliant and it will save you countless hours in fighting if you learn your love language and your partner's love language. So, learning each other's love language and being able to either A, effectively communicate, or B, become bilingual, so to speak, will successfully handle a great majority of your problems. In a typical relationship, there's a need, it's dependency, it's codependent in a lot of ways. Whereas in an enlightened relationship, you're together because you want each other. I mentioned some of this last time in the last video, but this last couple weeks, they've really hit that point home. In a typical relationship, there's a role and conflict. Like, you're going to be the female and you're going to do all of these female things and whatever, this is what women do, so you're going to do that. And you're going to be the male and these are all the male things you need to do and blah, 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 so here you go. An enlightened relationship doesn't do that. An enlightened relationship approaches every problem from a holistic perspective, where both people are equal partners to each other, cooperatively generating solutions. And the focus of an enlightened relationship is on conscious growth, whereas the focus of a traditional or a typical relationship is on growing through experiences, which a lot of times means fighting. And so a big difference between an enlightened relationship and a typical relationship is there's a lot less fighting to be had in an enlightened relationship. So all of that seems really lovely, and after about 2 weeks, I am on board, but it did take me a while. So let's jump to the homework, and I'll answer some of the questions, because I said, in these videos, I would answer the questions from my homework. So they ask, reflect on your parents' relationships or other adults who you observed in relationships when you were a child. My mother is going to love this. What roles, expectations, and beliefs about relationships did you learn from them? Oh, Mom. I love my mother. I love my mother so much, and my mom is amazing. She really is. She's one of the most amazing people you are ever going to meet. For example, my little brother died of a heroin overdose in 2010. And it really hurt her. But the next year, as Christmas was rolling around, she put together this wonderful project. And she called it Call Home. And she knit hats for homeless people and knit scarves and gloves and all these like accoutrements for homeless people because they don't have them. And a lot of people who are homeless due to drug addictions. And she wanted them to know that somebody loved them. And she wrote a note to each one of them on their hat or their gloves or their scarves. And she said, call home, somebody loves you. And she wound up creating this wonderful environment with local churches and local shelters and places near heroin dens. And her and her friends now go and hand out these hats and these gloves and these scarves, but they're also there if the people don't have anybody to call home to, and they give them love. And so my mom is constantly doing stuff like that. If people get sick, my mom's the first one showing up with a casserole and showing up and staying late and cleaning up and dropping shit off and leaving you alone so that you don't have to be bothered by her. Like, my mom really is really wonderful. But she is not going to like me sharing some of this. So now that I've built her up, let's lay Linda's cards on the table. Reflect on your parents' relationship. So my mom and dad actually had a really good relationship. My dad struggled with a gambling addiction, and there was one time he spent quite a bit of money, and it was money my mom had intended to use for the household goods. And so when she went to use it and it wasn't there, they had to have a talk. And she said, in hindsight, having talked to me about it, she said, when your dad did that, we established something that would work for both of us, which was I had a separate account put aside where he could have his gambling money. And he could go through that money, never have to talk to me about it, never have to do a word one about it. But if he spent all of that money and he wanted to dive into my household money or our joint money, we had to have a discussion about it. And my dad wasn't a bad gambler. Like, he never lost the house or anything like that. But my dad really had a very addictive personality, and he loved the excitement of the deal. My dad was a real estate agent. He was a commercial realtor. He was a broker, and he loved to make a deal. And so any chance he got to make a deal, my dad would make that deal. And it was fantastic growing up because I learned sales, I learned empathy, I learned how people think and feel, I learned how to wheel and deal. I learned a lot of stuff that was really, really valuable. But I think that stuck out most, that, we all have problems. And some of those problems are really drastic, like my little brother's heroin addiction. And some of them are just really inconvenient, like my father's tendency to gamble. Like I said, he didn't lose his shirt or anything like that, and I'm not making excuses for him. It was gambling and it was bad, but the two of them came up with a solution which worked for both of them, and he was able to navigate, and they never had a problem about it again. So on one level, I think I learned really valuable communication and compromising skills from my parents, but I also learned a lot of enabling. I also learned a lot of personal stress, like taking on things that aren't my own in order to prevent a fight or in order to not have conflict. So I had that, right? But my family fit into very traditional roles. Like, my mom was the housewife. In fact, now she calls herself a retired housewife. Whenever she has to go and write on any kind of application anywhere, her job is retired housewife. She feels like her children and her grandchildren are the biggest accomplishment in her life. My mom is archetypally the female role. And my dad was archetypally the male role in a lot of ways. Like, he was the breadwinner and the provider and all of these things. And they taught me some really valuable stuff. And I grew up in middle America. I grew up in the suburbs, and I came from a very unique family. So while I have a lot of eccentricities about me, there's also a lot of stuff that's very much traditional American values. And as I've gotten older and as I've gone into gay dating and I've had to navigate other people, those have caused some bit of a problem from time to time, because there's this whole thing about not wanting to be labeled and don't pigeonhole me, and isn't it great that we're gay and we don't have all these roles that we have to fill? And no, I don't think that's great. And so I struggle with that because I really genuinely don't think that's great. I think sometimes the boxes help us define who we are. And I think sometimes the roles help us navigate our relationships with other people. But I can't deny that the roles are so brutal and they're so confining and so damaging. And I can't reconcile these two things. And so I'm like, I don't really know what to do about that. So I struggled with that. Um, you know, what roles and expectations? Well, I had an expectation that I would meet somebody who would love me the way my dad loved my mom. And they would let me do the kinds of things that my mom did for my dad. And I really did identify and do identify with my mother's role in the relationship. But that's not serving me well. It was wonderful for my mom. It worked for her at the time that she was with my dad before he died. It it was useful for that phase of their life, and they had 5 kids. Like, it was useful for raising those 5 kids. But I'm not in the same boat. Thank God I don't have children. I don't want them ever. Listen, future husband, should you be watching this, I don't want kids. Like, I'm not changing my mind. I find them terrible little people. They're not even real people to me. I don't want kids. So, rant aside, thank God I don't have kids. But it worked for them. They had wonderful, wonderful relationships with each other. And they interacted well, and everybody in our family benefited from the way that they operated. Um, Next question. Think back to your earliest adult years and ask yourself how you would have described a typical romantic relationship. What were your expected male and female roles? See, I just kind of answered that inadvertently. What were your expected male and female roles? Was your view of relationships positive or negative? So, my view of relationships was actually very positive until I started dating gay men. And even in the beginning, my view of relationships was very positive. Like, I always held out hope that I would find a gay man who I loved, and we would be together, and we'd go on a few dates, we'd move the courtship into actual dating and have sex and learn to love each other, and all these wonderful things would happen, and then bam, marriage. But that did not happen. And it kind of soured the wine a little bit. So my current view on relationships, not so good. But in the past, it has been fucking phenomenal. Like, I was romantic and I idealized relationships. It was fantastic. But it was also naive and unrealistic. Like I said, I really like the gender roles. And I really like the idea that, the man does this and the woman does this. I don't know how I square that with the gay man and the other gay man do these things. But I struggle with the lack of roles in a gay relationship because it's constant negotiation, and you're negotiating with somebody who's like trying to negotiate their own self at the same time. So it's not just negotiating what they want, it's negotiating who they are. And you're negotiating what you want and who you are. And it's a clusterfuck of negotiations. So I struggle with that. Um, but I do understand that there is a need to branch out beyond the gender roles, that gender is not binary. And it is not the man does this and the woman does that, and vacuuming kitchen and breadwinning and this. I get it. I'm not stupid, but my emotional self loves the comfort of the finite definition. I want so bad to be able to name it and claim it and be done. So there's that. What new thoughts and actions would you like to replace these released beliefs with? Well, I haven't really released them yet. Um, so all right, let's release them, shall we? We'll do a little bit of woo woo here. So there's a woo woo way to do this and a more occult way to do this. Let me use the occult way and put the joking aside. So the occult way is to do what is called an occult denial. The occult denial basically names something, declares that it has no power over you, and removes it from your existence. You deny its power to influence you. So my occult denial is I deny the need for gender roles in my relationship. The concept that gender roles have any measure of comfort in them does not exist for me. Okay, so that's a little hard. Let me just be honest. I do release the idea that I need the gender roles, but I'm gonna have to work on making it so that they have no power over me. But I do release the idea that gender roles are necessary for a successful, loving relationship. And the idea that they are necessary holds no power over me. So I'm working on releasing those old beliefs. As for what I will replace them with, um, I think that the best thing to replace them with would be Sybil Leek's tenet of tolerance. We're human. We're going through so much just trying to find love. If my partner were to drop the ball from time to time, do I have to beat him over the head with it? Um, I would like to say the answer is no, and I'm going to work on making sure that I do. I'm going to make sure that I make sure that that answer is no, but right now I'm working on it. Okay, moving on. Uh, how would you describe the enlightened relationship that you truly desire? Okay. I do want the emotional intimacy and the support, and I want true companionship. I would love for my future relationship to look very similar to the group to what I have in my coven with my various witches, but I would like it to be a little bit more physically intimate. I'd like us to be building a life together and growing towards a mutually advantageous goal. But ultimately, I really want to feel about my future partner the way I feel about the witches in my coven. Perfect love and perfect trust. What are some specific things you can work on within yourself that would help you align with this new reality? Okay. I need to let go of my expectations of what a relationship is going to look like. I need to meet each new situation as it stands and be okay with it as it stands. Um, yeah, I need to let go of the desire to control the outcome. If I can do that, I think I can find the relationship that we're talking about here. So that's my homework and a little bit of my family history and a little bit of my crazy and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, y'all.